Nigel Farage, very nice to talk to you again. Are you still confident after this week that Brexit will happen by October 31?
Oh, I'm confident Brexit will happen, yes. By October the 31st, I'm very sceptical indeed. I mean, look, Boris Johnson is going to win this contest. Of that, I think there's very little doubt. He said we will leave on the 31st of October. In fact, he said all the same things Theresa May said about March the 29th. 108 times she told us we're leaving on March the 29th, and of course we didn't. Now, I think there is more sincerity about Brexit with Boris than there was with May, but I don't see, given the current makeup of Parliament, how he's going to be able to deliver it.
We've had this extraordinary day Thursday where the British Parliament has actually voted down the idea of a new leader proroguing Parliament, shutting Parliament, by 41 votes. Were you surprised at that number?
No. No, I mean, look, it's very simple. The situation in this country is the country is leave, voted leave, the country is still leave, arguably the country is more leave than it was 3 years ago, and Parliament just simply doesn't accept the result. That's the logjam, that's the problem that we have here. So Boris faces the most enormous challenge. You know, either he says, well, I'll just break my promise and we'll kick the can down the road for a further 6 months, but if he does that, you know, he risks electoral oblivion for the Conservative Party, or what he does is he goes for a big, bold general election. But here's the problem. Since you and I last spoke, something different has happened in British politics. A new party has come along. It's called the Brexit Party. It won the European elections heavily. It's still polling very high out there in the country. And the only way Boris could win that election is if he must come to some kind of accommodation with me and with the Brexit Party.
So this is very interesting, because if it does come to a general election, Boris Johnson has ruled out a deal with you on seats. Are you disappointed in that?
Look, you know, I've said all the way through this, if Boris wants to have a fight with me, then someone hold my jacket. That's fine. You know, I'll have a punch-up with him any day you like. But if he does that, if he chooses to see me as a political enemy, he can't win. So it's up to him.
You said you'd be back in the European Parliament if you needed to be, and you are. You've now got Ursula von der Leyen to deal with. Now, she said she's prepared to delay from the October 31 date. She's not prepared to renegotiate Brexit, though.
There is no renegotiation. They have signed up to a new European treaty. The British government agreed it, the British Parliament didn't. I don't see Brussels changing a single dot or comma of that. That isn't going to happen. So the only way we can leave cleanly, so we're actually out of their institutions, is to leave on WTO terms. That's the reality.
But hasn't the no-deal scenario become that much more difficult as of this week for Boris Johnson to deliver?
Well, and that's why I said to you at the start of this interview, you know, you said, are we going to get Brexit by October the 31st? We're going to get Brexit because public opinion is rock solid on the issue. Are we going to get it by the 31st of October? Well, not with this Parliament. There has to be, the only way we're going to get Brexit is with a new set of men and women sitting in Westminster who will actually carry out the wishes of the people.
But how are you going to do that? I mean, here you have millions of Brexit voters ostensibly behind you, and yet you've got to convert that to seats in a first-past-the-post environment, haven't you?
Because the whole situation's changed. I mean, look, there was a situation where in 2017, in England, certainly, even England and Wales, you know, we'd gone back to the Conservatives and Labour getting 85% of the vote between them. If you look at the current opinion polls between Labour and the Conservative, they're in the low 40s. So something remarkable's happened. The Brexit Party's come along, taken a big chunk of the vote, all right? It's prompted an equal and opposite reaction in the rise of the Liberal Democrats. So we've now effectively got, in our national opinion polls, 4 parties all within a couple of pips of each other. That situation wasn't the same when UKIP was strong back in 2015. We're looking at completely changed politics.
Even though the polls suggest, or the polls that I've seen, suggest that the Brexit Party, despite the votes, is not actually going to pick up the seats.
Well, the last piece of electoral calculus said they might pick up 140 seats. Who's to, you know, we're living in very, I tell you what, you know, it must be great for the bookmakers because people are putting money on how many seats parties are going to win. No one has got a clue how this plays out. What I know from my side of the fence is that if Brexit is not delivered on the 31st of October, then I believe the Brexit Party would be the biggest party at the next general election. That's how high the stakes are. In the meantime, assuming Boris Johnson does take the leadership, he will be heading to Europe. Do you think the no-deal threat actually will be there? Well, it's very interesting because Mr. Barnier, who's been their chief negotiator, and by the way, when I saw him in the coffee bar a couple of months ago, and he's always very polite and very nice, and I said good morning, and I said, Mr. Barnier, I just so wish you were on our side because you've done so much better at this than we've done. You know, he's made it clear just today that Mrs. May never, ever threatened no deal. She told the British public she would, but she never actually did. Top EU bureaucrat Martin Selmayr says the same thing. I know. It is remarkable. And what it means is that Mrs. May just openly lied to the British public and betrayed the result of that referendum, which is pretty shameful stuff. I don't know any more than you do. You know, we know what Boris is saying in order to get elected. We know that the result of the Brexit Party in the European elections guaranteed him victory. What we don't know is just how brave Boris is going to be. You know, Churchill has always been his hero. Well, let's hope he's got the same level of guts, but I'm just not convinced. So, Nigel Farage, how do you see this playing out from now, and when do you see an election or a possible vote of no confidence ahead of October 31? If we get brave Boris goes to the House of Commons, faces them down, loses emotion of confidence, goes to the country, reaches a sensible accommodation with me, wins a massive majority, and Brexit gets delivered. Before or after October 31? It needs to be before. It's got to be before. It's got to be October the 24th. The Thursday before, that's when it's got to be. But if Boris blinks, and if Boris decides he's not prepared to risk the premiership, to risk the very thing he's wanted for 40 years. You know, when he was 15, he was telling people, I'm going to become the Prime Minister. Do you think Boris sees his finest hour as becoming Prime Minister or as delivering Brexit? Well, that's the point, isn't it? And I was always told on my first day in politics, there are two kinds of people in this game, those who want to be something and those who want to do something. We are going to find out within the next fortnight which of those Boris is. One of the things he's got on his slate is to do a trade deal with the United States. He can't begin to do that before Brexit has happened, can he? Well, that's just rubbish, isn't it? I mean, you know, the European Union rules say we can't sign trade deals until we've left the European Union. All right, fine. European Union rules don't explicitly say we can't start those negotiations, and I tell you what, we should be there in DC right now, having those negotiations, as we should be in Sydney as well. You look at the level of trade between Australia and the United Kingdom, frankly, given all the shared ties that we have, it's pitifully low. So we should be having a grown-up conversation about this too. Nigel, we've had this drama with the British ambassador to the US, Sir Kim Darroch, and Donald Trump's quotes around him. Now, who should the new ambassador be? I think you've ruled yourself out. Who should it be? You know Donald Trump. Well, it should have been me from the start, shouldn't it? It's obvious. I mean, how can you have somebody like Sir Kim Darroch, a globalist, a supporter of the European project, friends with the Clintons? So you wouldn't rule yourself out? But 3 years ago, I'd have been the perfect person to do it. Right now, even if I was offered it, I couldn't accept it because it would look like I'd been bought off. It would look like I'd run away from the battlefield when actually this whole Brexit thing is coming to a head. Would you look to play a role, it shouldn't though? Be. Well, of course. Look, I don't just know Donald Trump. I know many members of this administration. I'm well connected in DC. I think there's a huge potential for our two countries for an all-encompassing relationship. And of course, I'm talking defence through NATO, I'm talking shared intelligence, but I'm talking trade as well. Already, we are the biggest overseas investor in the USA, and they're the biggest investor in our country. So that's a really good platform upon which to build. I want to ask you about your Brexit Party, because it's not set up like a political party. It's a company. You've set it up like as a company. I know, that's why it works. Yeah. Now, why have you done that? Because you own 60% of it, and people have accused you in the European Parliament of being undemocratic yourself. But why have you set it up like that? In order to... Speed. Speed. Decision-making speed.
And also to choose who you want on your side?
Within 6 weeks of launching the Brexit Party, we won a national election. Didn't just win it, we got 50% more votes than our nearest rival. It was the most incredible victory. And if I hadn't set it up as a limited company, which I was the majority shareholder, where I could stand or fall on the decisions I made, if I'd gone for committees, we'd still be talking.
And you very much look to Beppe Grillo's five-star movement in Italy and his social media strategy, didn't you?
Well, here's the irony. Actually, we will become the most democratic party in the country, because what we're going to do is put the big policy decisions out to our registered supporters, and they will vote and decide policy online. I watched everything Grillo did with the five-star movement. I went 5 years ago to Milano. I watched what he was doing. I realised that is the politics of the future.
And you've even got somebody, a former Cambridge Analytica lady, as one of your MEPs.
Not quite true. She worked for SCL, which was a forerunner of it. But yeah, big emphasis, huge emphasis on social media, big emphasis on video, a big emphasis on accessibility. Our people who pay 25 quid a year to be part of our organisation will have more say than any member of any traditional political party.
Finally, Nigel Farage, if and when Brexit is actually delivered, will the Brexit Party continue to exist? And if so, why?
Well, what's interesting is this, that I used to think for years just getting Brexit was all we needed. Now I realise, in fact, Brexit is the beginning of what is needed. We need a political revolution in this country. Our institutions, our election methods, our House of Lords, many of those things are so completely unfit for purpose.
So you wouldn't rule out being Prime Minister yourself?
Who's to say what the future holds? I've no idea. What I do know is that for this country to be fit for the 21st century in a global economy, we need radical change in this country, and I'm going to try my best to deliver it.